Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find a tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Thank you for listening to this week's podcast, the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
As always, we thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. Couldn't do it without you.
For sure. Jimmy, you're perky today for somebody.
I know. I got an hour of sleep last night. I'm raring to go.
I know. As I'm
running on
to
pure
you,
adrenaline.
It's like, whoa, what happened here?
You never made me my coffee.
I did not make you
She promised me coffee. We've been going.
Oh, I feel bad.
We've been going nonstop for a while today, and
yeah.
I didn't get my coffee.
This poor boy didn't get much sleep, and I didn't either. We had storms during the night that got everybody up and awake, and
yeah, it's all good.
you had your kids, and I had my cats. So
yeah,
they screeching. Okay,
we're here and ready to roll.
We are here, and we do thank you.
In the public eye right now is the Gabby Petito homicide. It was ruled a homicide, and of course, a lot of mystery is surrounding this case. Brian Laundrie, her fiance, is on the lam right now. He's in hiding. Nobody knows where he is. We know that he returned back from their quote-unquote vacation. They'd been gone for months. He returned back home driving her van in Florida. Her family didn't find out until, a week after he had returned?
Yeah, it was at least,
They just assumed that they didn't have cell service, and that's why they couldn't get a hold of their daughter. Turns out that her fiance returned without her. She was MIA. They did an expansive manhunt and found her body, and the coroner ruled that a homicide. A lot of talk is swirling around this infamous police stop. The police pulled Brian Laundrie over after they got a report. There was a 911 call of some kind of domestic disturbance. I listened to the 911 call. I don't know if you did.
I did not listen to that. I listened to the entire interrogation and stop, when the police stopped the vehicle. And I was consumed by it. In fact, this whole story has gripped the nation for quite a while now because we don't like anything like this. We kind of fell in love with this little couple when they first started, and then to think that a murder took place really has everybody shaken up, really.
So, a lot of talk is surrounding this stop that the police did because, Laundrie was so soft-spoken, he was polite, he was cooperative, he was apologetic for speeding. But I wrote a Facebook post, and I know several other people have. Mine was viewed within 24 hours. It was shared almost 1,000 times, and I think it had over 30,000 views. I haven't even looked at the statistics because I haven't been online for much at all for the last week. But what I wrote in that is that I thought that the police, given the information that they had at the time, did everything that they could do within the confines of the law. You can't hold people based on suspicion. Hopefully you guys can't hear that equipment. There's some crazy equipment right outside. I don't know what they're bulldozing my house or what's going on out there. That is loud.
But I think it's right there. Yeah.
But at any rate, I think it's interesting that interesting isn't the right word. I think it's important that a lot of the people didn't pick up on the signs. And when you've been studying abusers for so long, and especially people who are domestic abuse victims, they immediately picked up on it on the body cam. They were like, holy cow, he was too cooperative. He was too polite. He was cracking jokes at all the wrong times. He was at one point right in the middle of a really serious conversation during the questioning, he joked with one of the officers and said, how do I get rid of her? And she disappeared literally a few days after that. He was talking about her being crazy. He asked if he could go to jail. I don't really know what he meant, but it was really awkward, really weird, really forced. I think he was implying, like, if I do something to her, can I go to jail? So, I think the police officers genuinely did everything that they could, given the information they had. Now, with that said, they're under investigation right now, which is pretty normal, I think, in a homicide case. But the 911 caller revealed that he had witnessed Brian slapping Gabby in the face.
All right.
Okay, so that was
excuse me.
That was never mentioned, or at least it was kind of in passing, not the slapping part, but he said he had grabbed her face to kind of push her away because she was coming at him and punching him.
Right.
So he played it off like, he was just all calm and collective, and he just, no, I just kind of grabbed her face and pushed it away. As with any abuser, there's always enough truth in what they say that I think Brian Laundrie assumed that information got to the police in the 911 call. So I think, given the information that they had at the time, my opinion, the police officers handled that the best that they could. I know there's a lot of controversy around that. I see, advocates saying, well, the police, this is why we have a problem, because they had a gut feeling and they didn't pursue it. They called Gabby the aggressor, and they called Brian Laundrie the victim. I think, again, given the information that they had, and that's what this investigation will find out, is why wasn't that information revealed to them in the 911 call that she was being slapped around by
exactly
by Brian.
Right.
So, and it could have been 100 different things. And I think this is what people don't realize. Police officers are always under pressure, constantly. They're always dealing with problematic people. They're always dealing with mental illnesses. They're dealing with drug addictions. They're dealing with people that are high on all kinds of substances. They're dealing with attempted suicides. They're dealing with domestic violence. They're dealing with car accidents. They have to pull corpses out of these vehicles. Just constantly.
Not an easy job, and yes, they are. And I know where you're going with this. I think it goes back to, you have to do what you do within the confines of the law, or they get in trouble if they overstep boundaries.
Yeah, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Right, and the law doesn't allow you to arrest people on just a gut feeling.
Yeah, you can't hold people on suspicion alone.
Right. At this point, when I watched that whole clip, and I watched it very carefully, little Gabby was emotional. She looks like a little girl in a lot of ways. And she kept saying, I have OCD, and it was me, and I got all upset because, he got things dirty, and we had a fight earlier because it was dirty inside, and I like things to be clean and all that. Well, when you hear just that, you don't have...
okay, she has OCD.
You think, okay, she's really emotional, like she said. And if you watch somebody with OCD, it's hard. I mean, to because they do get upset, if things aren't perfectly in order. Then you have him, who's very calm and put together and kind of laughs
Polite.
and, yeah, says, I know she was having a rough morning.
Mm-hmm.
We did have a fight, and, we had an argument, and, I was sorry, and we're okay now.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you tend
He was
to
like the
believe
voice
it.
of reason.
Right. You tend to believe that. Not defending or not, saying, okay, the police officers are already always right. They didn't have the information they needed, period. They
Now, with
really
that
didn't.
said, I mean, the reverse side of that coin is all of the indicators were there that she was in distress.
Right.
Both she and Brian Laundrie mentioned her OCD. He, of course, was being that anchor who was holding her fast, and he's just trying to help her through her OCD. When they opened the back of the van, I don't know if you caught that, but it looked like a train wreck happened inside of that vehicle. Somebody with OCD wouldn't be able to ride in that vehicle.
No, and that was so
that should have been one of the indicators. There were a lot of them.
Big.
Again, the inappropriate joking. How do I get rid of her? Laughing at all the wrong times. Being over cooperative.
Do you think youth had something to do with them overlooking some of the stuff?
Could be. The fact that they were both in their early 20s.
Yeah,
and
I think
kind of
I don't know. Sometimes we look at younger people through different eyes and think, well, you're just immature. You're having a spat. You're on this fun thing that you're doing, and you had a fight this morning, and you got a little out of control. You guys will be okay. Take a night. Cool
yeah,
down.
I do think that was a factor.
And youth, sometimes we do that, with young people. We tend to overlook the seriousness of the issue.
And I think the fact that Gabby didn't look like she was scared of Brian.
Yeah,
when they separated them, it wasn't like this sheer sense of relief on her behalf. And he certainly wasn't. He wasn't worked up by the fact that they were separated.
Interesting that they didn't resist when the officer said, I think a night apart would be okay. And I was waiting for her at some point to say something or whisper the words, I need help. Something like that.
That rarely happens, and I wouldn't expect that from her at all.
You know me. I just...
Because he was right there. If she would have done that for her, that in her mind, that would have been a death sentence.
Yeah, I guess you're right, because she didn't know what was going to happen at that point.
But I think, so I look at this from a different angle, okay? Because I actually, of course, let me say this with a caveat. The investigation will find out whether the police officers handled this appropriately.
Right.
So, just from my limited perspective...
And our limited knowledge. We don't have all the knowledge, obviously.
Right. But I think they acted as appropriately as they could, given the information they had, which apparently wasn't all the information that was vital.
Right.
Somehow those wires got crossed, whether it was on the dispatching side. Think of all the people that those channels of communication have to go through, too. 911 call to 911 dispatcher, 911 dispatcher to police dispatcher to police officers, and then maybe those police officers to responding officers.
Right.
So, it's not uncommon for information to vanish or to get misconstrued along the way. That happens all the time. So, whether somebody messed up that information or not, I don't know is really relevant. It just, sometimes it just happens. The other part of that is that this is one of the things that really agitated me in this whole defund the police movement, because police departments are already very strapped for cash. They do not have resources like people think they do. I work with police departments, and let me tell you, at the bottom of the barrel for places that are able to pay me to do trainings, it's police departments. Local police departments do not have money. They're running oftentimes ratty, old, worn-out equipment. They don't have money to pay for trainings, proper trainings for their officers. Right. So these officers are taking this job knowing that they don't have all the tools in their belt, so to speak, in their training to be able to handle these situations properly. Mix that with a very high-risk job. Mix that with the current political climate, where police officers are legitimately targeted. I mean legitimately at this point. They are targeted. They're often hated. They're spit at, the stuff thrown at them. They're shot at just for being police officers. You know, we're living in a time where it's not like these guys are like, oh, you know, it's an office job. Let me prop my feet up and think through this.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And we'll really process this, and we'll take all the time in the world. Every time that they get called out to a call,
it's a question mark. Is somebody going to pull a gun on me? Are they going to have a car chase?
Are we tied up for something that's more serious, where somebody's in imminent danger?
Yeah.
So, you know, they're always weighing those things too. And it's those things that, you know, we don't think about, those of us who aren't police officers. But it is a high-stress
I'm going to back up here,
job.
Jimmy. When I think of 911, and I've not yet had that experience of having to rely on 911, in my mind, and I think in lots of people's minds, we think of an immediate response, that you make the call and right away that car comes, you know, that trooper is to your side, to your aid, and they have all the information. I'm thankful that you relayed the progression of that call. It doesn't happen that way.
No.
By the time that information gets to the responding officer, you're right. Vital information can be lost very easily.
Get lost.
Yeah. Very easily.
Yeah, it happens really often. Probably more often than people can imagine.
Right.
Which is another thing too. I think sitting in the comfort of our living room holding the remote control, we're like, oh, well, why would he come and start harassing this person, and I don't want to turn this into a race thing. Just pick any traffic stop, right, or any stop of anybody. From the comfort of our couch, it's easy to say, well, why would they come with attitude, and why would they come with quote unquote both guns ablazing?
What went on before, right?
These guys oftentimes are given such limited information or misinformation that's relayed to them, and that's just part of the system. That's just part of having a system where you're understaffed. You don't have 15 dispatchers who got 8 hours of sleep the night before.
Right. Well, back to Gabby. In hindsight, we see a lot of red flags with this couple. In hindsight, and I watched the video in hindsight. Obviously, I knew she had been murdered, so I'm watching it through different eyes. Also, much different eyes than the officers were experiencing when they stopped this young couple. Yeah. So I think for all of us, in hindsight, we're picking up on, look at this. Look at
the signs.
Yeah.
And they were there.
They were there.
They really were.
They were there. Even so much as when you said, did you see all the mess in the back of that van? Yeah. OCD wouldn't tolerate that. Something happened that morning.
Yeah.
Big time, because that's not what it would look like. But so what do we do? How do we remedy some of this misinformation, or how do we get better trained, or what's the answer to, had proper things been done, maybe Gabby would still be with us.
Yeah.
And I think that's what pains everybody who has been following this case.
Well, I think backing up to the 911 caller, we are trained as a society to not intervene. What happens to somebody else, you call 911, which is a proper response. I would never say don't call 911. The guy who called absolutely responded properly. Right. But we're taught that that's the only thing that we can do, that we can't intervene. We can and we should. Mm-hmm. This guy who allegedly saw, or he reported that he saw it, he called 911, and I listened to the call, and he said he witnessed Brian, or he thought he witnessed Brian slapping this young woman. That's an opportunity to do minor intervention before the police get there, or at least keep a close eye and move in a little bit closer. The other day, I heard yelling and screaming outside of my office at the church building. And it took me a second because it just caught me off guard. And I was like, that's a lady who's screaming at the top of her lungs. It sounds like she's in distress. Mm-hmm. So I opened up the door, and she was screaming at her boyfriend, or whoever the guy was. Mm-hmm. And I mean, just screaming at him. And I just said, "Is everything okay?" Mm-hmm. And turned out I think it was just flared tempers. But it's hard to assess those things. Maybe this guy was a killer. Mm-hmm. Maybe she was a killer. Mm-hmm. I don't know that. Don't know. In those few seconds, it's not like you can do this perfect assessment and get everything right. So like you mentioned, every opinion that we're forming right now is based on hindsight. Mm-hmm. It's based on, this has been going on since mid-September. We have all this information now actually, that those officers didn't have.
Right.
They did not have the information that we have.
Of information, right. And we've had time to process everything. Every movement we can replay.
Right.
We can replay that video over and over again and see it. And we say, whoa, there's something they should have picked up on. There's something. And, I don't know, we weren't in their shoes. We weren't there, but what can we do? I think you're right. We are very uninvolved, myself included. I was driving home from work the other night, 10:30 was last Tuesday, and I see this red light on the Stutzmantown Road right by the railroad tracks there. How far along? I'm almost home at that point. Old country road, no street lights or anything. And I couldn't tell what that light meant. Was there something on the railroad? So I get up closer, inch along. Well, here it was somebody trying to tow a vehicle that had gone down into a ravine, gone right off the road, deep down, and flipped way over. And I initially thought, I should check to see if they're okay. And then you know what I thought? No, I don't know.
Granny might wind up missing.
Yeah, I did. I thought that.
You don't know.
No,
you really don't.
And I thought, all I have on me is a cell phone. I don't have any other anything. I'm out in the middle of no homes, there are people. And I thought, and I drove on. That still bothers me because I don't know if they were okay. But on the other hand, I didn't want to stop my car and get out either at 10:30 at night.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. We're always making these judgment calls constantly.
Yeah.
Police officers do the same thing. Mm-hmm. They had to make assessments in the moment, given the information they had. Could they have done a better job? 100%. Absolutely. I don't think there's anybody, including the officers, who would deny that they could have done a better job. Could they have prevented a death?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah. Right. Now, they did spend that night apart, right?
Mm-hmm. They did.
That's what I mean. And I thought that was really great on the officer's part to suggest that. And that, there you have the couple saying, okay, that is a good idea. We'll cool down. Obviously, it didn't prevent the death. It didn't prevent the murder.
And he was so calculated. And I think... again, hindsight, you can see that he was just so calm and so chill.
Oh, yeah.
And I have to remind myself of this. This homicide happened after that encounter with the police. Mm-hmm. So how do we translate this to church? And like you said, what do we do?
Right. What do we do with this?
What do we do with this information? What do we do about this? Because these are real threats that happen every single day. Some of you listeners have experienced life-threatening situations from abusers. What do we do with this information? Well, I think, first of all, we have to give grace to people who aren't always on their game. All of us have bad moments where we're not on our game. I'm not one of these people that's saying, well, the blood is on the police officer's hands. I don't think that. I think they responded appropriately, again, given the information they had, from my perspective. An investigation will find that out. But two, I think we have the ability to know when somebody does feel at least uncomfortable, maybe not threatened, but uncomfortable. That ought to be enough for some sort of an intervention. And the officers, again, did do that. The female, she was a national park ranger. I found out later on that she spoke with Gabby privately, just the two of them, woman to woman, and she urged her to get away from Brian Laundrie. She said, you know, I really hope you're able to get away from him. They had kind of this heart-to-heart. That was an appropriate response.
Right.
That was
Absolutely.
the right thing to do.
Well, I think the right thing to do also was to suggest, and there again, they couldn't enforce if Gabby and Brian hadn't consented, but to suggest spend the night apart. Cool down, calm down, spend the night apart. It'll be better in the morning. So during that period of time, you know, it's like, doggone, Gabby, you know, I wish, like, I get all worked up. I wish she would have said something to somebody at that
I think she
point.
was too terrified.
Yeah.
I really do.
And then I have to
think
remember, abuse works like that.
Yeah.
You're too afraid. The fear factor is
Yeah.
huge. And Brian, on the other hand, obviously was probably thrilled with the whole situation. He pulled it off. Pulled it off.
And still can't be found.
And still can't be found, right?
I mean, he came back home without her after she's dead, allegedly.
Right.
You know,
Right.
can't say definitively yet, but allegedly killed by him. Sure doesn't look good for him right now. But he goes back home and goes on a camping trip with his parents.
It's
I mean,
just
try to wrap your mind around
right.
that.
It boggles our minds. For the abused person, where is the help? I know I have a friend right now dealing with threats from her husband. She said a PFA is nothing more than a piece of paper.
That's true.
And it is true. And I don't have good words of comfort to give her. She has surveillance set up at her home, you know, cameras where she can see him driving by, kind of harassing him. She's called the police multiple times, and his answer is always, I didn't do anything. I didn't enter her property. Those are my kids in that house.
It's a public street. I'm allowed to drive down.
He said,
I'm allowed to
he
drive down the
absolutely
street.
said that. It's like so frustrating because there needs to be better help available also.
I don't think it's going to come because I think,
Yeah.
again, it goes back to budgeting issues. It comes to every single department, whether it's police, whether it's counseling, whether it's victim services, you know, you name it, children and youth, protective services. Name an organization that's not absolutely 100% underfunded and overwhelmed. You're not going to find it.
And I know at this point in time they are.
So for us to think that 911 is our only option, I'm certainly not calling for vigilante justice at all, but we need to be protectors of each other. We need to have an awareness. You know, I do my work in the church. We need to have an awareness that when a woman speaks up and says that she feels threatened, that's not a lot of information to go on,
Right.
but it's enough.
Take it seriously.
It's enough to take it very seriously.
Seriously, yes.
And ask the right questions, and try to get her help the best that you can. You know, at our congregation, we've helped with multiple women who were in domestic violence situations, and we took every one of those threats as a very credible threat. And 100% of the time they were.
I'll say it again, too, that domestic violence dangerous. Is ramped up right now because COVID is ramped up again, and anger issues are prevalent. Drug issues are prevalent. Alcoholism is ramped up. I just was reading something about that the other day. Alcohol is on the rise again, big time. And so in the mix is domestic violence.
Yeah.
And women especially become targets of domestic violence and children and need help. So we need to be very aware, very, very aware. I like what you said, the phrase you said, we need to be protectors of each other as best we can.
Yeah, we can't just rely on the police. I'm telling you right now, I cannot name a single police department in the nation that's not completely underfunded and overwhelmed.
Not just that, Jimmy. I believe that the laws are also weak, I should say. They're weak.
Look at this kind of stuff too, the corruption too. Look at our district attorney that was just arrested for rape.
Right.
Yeah. Forcible entry into a woman's home. He was Snapchatting with her, and that's our district attorney.
It's crazy.
I mean, this stuff, and he has a very violent past. He was arrested, not even a year ago.
Right.
He was arrested as the sitting district attorney.
It was less than a year ago.
For it was some kind of a domestic disturbance at a business for his daughter's birthday party. Something, the pizza didn't get delivered or something, and he was making threats and cussing women out and acting all macho. So that's
our DA. Yeah,
that's
our legal.
That's our DA.
Yeah, I know.
So you have it everywhere. I mean, domestic violence is very real. It's very serious. I hope our DA gets plowed to the wall with charges.
Yeah.
And actually, Attorney General Josh Shapiro is the one that's handling this case.
Good.
And Josh doesn't, I call him Josh. Attorney General Shapiro does not take any kind of sexual violence.
He's a good guy. All. He's wonderful.
He has no tolerance.
So what words of wisdom can we leave anyone who is at the hand of domestic violence right now with overworked and understaffed officers and, agencies?
Yeah.
What do we do?
I think now more than ever we need to have a beckoning call where we call people to arms, not arms. I have to be careful what I say, especially we're talking about violence.
It'll be misled,
But call people to action. Call people to be protectors of each other. Churches really genuinely need to be better trained in just about every area when it comes to any kind of sexual or physical or mental violence, spiritual abuse, all these things. Churches are one of the worst places for people to be right now. And while I lament that, I have hope that that's going to turn around because I do work with some churches that are incredible.
Right.
They really are incredible. We need to start there. It goes back to that question that I asked, I wrote about in my book where I was crying out to God, where were you, God? And the answer I got back was, where were my people? I mean, that's a very real motto that runs my life is, if I hear breaking glass from the house next over and I hear somebody yelling and screaming for help, or if I just see subtle signs that somebody's in distress, it's my responsibility as a fellow human being, as a Christian, as a father, as a husband.
Right.
It's my responsibility to step in and say, are you okay? How can I help you?
Sometimes just those words, Jimmy, will diffuse something that has escalated. It's interesting what people with violence, tempers and whatnot, sometimes that's enough to calm down the situation. Not always, but sometimes it is.
Yeah, probably in rare occasions, but it's, I mean, better than doing nothing.
Well, for that moment, yeah.
So,
right.
Just assess and
I think this is tough. I think it pulls at our hearts, all of us, because there are no easy answers. There are no immediate answers. There are thousands upon thousands in distress right now, living in violent situations that need help and don't know where to go, how to get out, what to do, who to talk to, who to trust. We live in a hard time right now. We really, really do. And I think the best we can do right now is what Jimmy said, is to become, keepers of each other as best as we can.
Yeah, we need each other.
We do.
I mean, we really do. We really, really need to link arms and watch out for each other.
Right. Violence is not far away.
No.
Abuse is never far away from us. Two people over, and you will have an abusive, family or abused child, an abused wife, just that close to us. So we need to be alert at all times.
Yeah. So with that, we'll leave you with that truth bomb. Be alert, be vigilant, watch out for people, watch for people who are in distress.
Right.
And intervene when you can. And when appropriate, call 911. That is an appropriate response. And, do the best you can. Do everything within your power to help people who are in distress. We thank you guys for tuning in to this episode, and we'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.